back to another episode of the Mindset Map podcast with me, Rachel. Today, I want to talk about the reason why we feel so uncomfortable seeing and hearing ourselves on video, on camera, and the kind of science behind why this is completely normal and practical tips of what we can do about it. So the first thing to talk about is this concept is called the familiarity principle or the exposure effect. And essentially what this is, our brains are wired to think more favorably towards things that we are more familiar with. And the reason behind this, if we think back to our caveman times, that, there's predators everywhere, danger everywhere. So things that were familiar were safe. So our brains don't need to be on the alert. They don't need to be worried about things that are safe. So we prefer those. We're more familiar with them. We like them because they don't indicate any danger. If we see or hear something that's unfamiliar, then that could mean danger, that could mean a predator. And so what it does is it triggers fight or flight response in order to respond to this potential attack or this potential danger. So when we are starting to see ourselves on videos or hear ourselves and hear our voice and see our face, this is unfamiliar. And so therefore, it triggers that fight or flight response in our brains. And so that is what is happening the first few times when we start to see and hear ourselves. The second thing to mention is about our voices and the sounds of our voice. Now, I've had so many people say to me, oh my God, I just hate my voice on recording. I hate hearing myself. I'm so squeaky and high and I don't think that's how I sound. The reason for this, again, the science behind this is when we hear ourselves talking in real time, we hear through a combination of bone conduction and air conduction. So the sound travels through sort of inside our head and out to our ears. So part of it sort of travels outside and part of it travels through. And so what happens is we hear a tone that's much lower than what we then hear when we hear it back. So I've said this to people before and then they say to me, yeah, but doesn't that then mean that everybody else is hearing that really high-pitched version of my voice that I don't like? And yes, whilst that is the voice that other people are hearing, they're not hearing it the same way you're thinking about it, because the reason why you feel uncomfortable with that sound of your voice, again, is this unfamiliarity, because that's not how you're used to hearing yourself sound. And so therefore, again, triggers that fight or flight because you don't understand why it sounds different and you feel uncomfortable with that. So that's the reason why we sound so different. And then the other thing to think about is what we call confirmation bias. And so essentially, our brains are wired to solve problems. They're wired to look for solutions to the problems that we are putting out there. Let's think of your brain as like a chat GPT. So whatever you put in, what you're asking it to look for is what it comes back as results. And our brains are exactly the same. So how confirmation bias works in this sense is if we're feeling uncomfortable and maybe self-conscious about putting ourselves out there on video, then essentially we are asking our brains to look for evidence that this is true. And so of course, off our brains go, and that's what they'll do. And of course they'll find it, right? If we ask our brain to find anything, they'll find it. And so it will look for this information to confirm the bias that we have, that we're uncomfortable and we look awkward and we're self-conscious on screen. So our brain is then looking for that. And so because that then confirms our theories, what happens is this leads to kind of like an amplification and like a distortion and like a distorted view. So it sees things and it focuses on things that we wouldn't see and that maybe aren't even there, because it creates this sort of amplified, distorted version because it's looking for this information that you've asked it to look for. And then a final point on this, just adding to that, is this idea of hyperfocus. So what happens here is when we are in hyperfocus mode, we suddenly see and hear everything, things that we've never seen before, because our brain is in a mode now we're asking it to scan for danger, for threat. We're saying to our brain, I don't feel comfortable here, I don't feel safe, and therefore look and listen for things that might not feel right. Look and listen for things that could be dangerous. And so our brain goes into this hyper focus mode and suddenly can see and hear all sorts of things that we didn't normally see. So we can suddenly become really fixated on things that we wouldn't normally see, because our brains, again, so clever. In normal everyday life, if we're not feeling threatened, if we're not in that fight or flight mode and we're not in this hyper focus mode, then our brains filter out information it doesn't think we need. And I think there's something like, I think our brains, on average, when we're not in hyper focus mode, our brains will filter about 80-90% of the things that we see and hear around us. It will filter them out because it doesn't think they're relevant, and so therefore we literally will not see them or will not hear them, because our brain has just gone, that's not information, I don't need to pass that on. So we won't notice it. So I don't know if anybody has seen, there's an amazing example of this. It's done the rounds online quite a lot. It's basically a basketball game, and you are asked to count the number of baskets scored. So you go through, you're trying to count, trying to get to the right number. And then at the end, instead of asking you how many baskets, it said, did you see the gorilla? And what happened during the time when you were counting the baskets, somebody in a gorilla suit literally ran across the court, came right up to the screen of the camera, and then went off again. And you did not see it at all because you were focusing on counting the baskets. So it's not like you noticed it and you literally didn't see it because your brain filtered it out because that wasn't what it was focusing on. So that is exactly what happens when we suddenly are seeing and hearing ourselves for the first time. We become this sort of hyper focus. And so all of a sudden we are seeing and hearing tiny little imperfections that we're going to then fixate on that we've never noticed before. Sometimes you watch yourself back and you think, oh my God, I never realized that I have one eyebrow higher than the other, or I never realized that I do something weird with my hands when I talk, or I have this like little bit of hair that sticks up here. Whatever it is, we suddenly become hyper aware and hyper focus on it. But when others are watching us, they're not in that hyper focus mode because they don't see us as a threat. They're not scared by what we're saying. So therefore their brain is filtering out. So 99 times out of 100, the people watching will not see or hear those things that we're fixating on, because their brain's like, that's not necessary information, it's filtered it out. So yes, maybe we do have a bit of hair that sticks up or whatever, but most people wouldn't notice it because they're not in that hyper-focus mode when they're listening to us. They're probably just listening, doing something else at the same time, not massively focusing and fixating on every little detail like we are. So that is a whistle-stop tour of the science behind why we don't like seeing and hearing ourselves on camera, on video, and why we can feel really uncomfortable and self-conscious. I wanted to really get down on the geeky science detail on this for you to prove that it's normal and to prove that we are scientifically wired this way, that our brains are just trying to protect us, and that is why we feel uncomfortable. So you're not on your own, you're not the only person. Everyone else, has got loads of confidence online, they're off doing their thing and nobody else feels uncomfortable apart from me. No, everybody feels uncomfortable when they start doing it because it's unfamiliar, because we're hyper-focused, because we go into that fight or flight mode, because our voice sounds different from the way we normally see it. And even our face can look different because depending on whether we have selfie camera on or back camera or whatever, sometimes the face can be like a mirror version of our face, which is what we're used to seeing in the mirror, or it can be the other version, which we're not used to seeing. And again, it triggers that unfamiliarity, the fight or flight response, and feels uncomfortable. So it's perfectly normal. And now we've debunked that and got that out of the way, I want to share with you 2 very simple things that you can do to just get over this and get used to it and start getting more comfortable. The first thing, I think it's really important to try and get specific about what you don't like and what you're uncomfortable with, because there's probably something that we can do to help this. So for example, some people will say to me, I don't like how my face looks. I feel like it doesn't look like me. I feel like I look really tired or pale, or I look uncomfortable, something like that. So for example, there's so many things that we can do that will make this better. We can look at lighting, we can look at the angle of the camera, we can look at how you position yourselves in front of windows, we can look at the colour you wear and what that's doing to your skin tone. All sorts of things that we can do. How you wear your hair makes a massive difference. I had a client who realised that she hated any videos that she created of herself when she had her hair up in a high ponytail, because she felt it just sort of exposed her more. It just made her feel more uncomfortable. When she had her hair down, she felt more comfortable. So there's loads of little things like that. If you can get specific and be like, okay, this is the thing I feel uncomfortable with. Like, for example, I was about to record this episode now. I switched the camera on and I thought, oh my God, I look really pale. So I quickly ran off, whacked a bit of bronzer on and came back. Now, would you guys notice the difference if I had or I hadn't? Probably not. No, because you're not in hyperfocus mode. You're not going to sit there going, oh God, Rach looks a bit pale today. Probably not. But I feel more comfortable now because I see my face and I feel more comfortable with the way it looks. So therefore, that is something I did to just make it a little bit easier for myself. And there's loads of things like that that you can do as well. So that is the first thing, to get really clear on what it is that you feel most uncomfortable with. And the second thing, as so fabulously Nike puts it, just do it. Unfortunately, that is the only way to get going and to get more comfortable and to get yourself out there, is just to do it and do it and then do it again and then do it some more and do it and do it and do it. Now, the reason why is because we want to take advantage of this whole exposure theory. So the more we see ourselves, the more we hear ourselves, the more comfortable we get with it. And it really does work, I promise you. I used to hate the sound of my voice, and now I can barely hear a difference. When I hear myself talking, or if I hear myself back on a podcast or on a video, I can barely hear a difference now. Whereas at the start, I used to hear my voice so differently. It used to make me so uncomfortable and I really, really didn't like it. But the more I did it, the more I became familiar with hearing my voice on screen. And then it doesn't bother me anymore because I've become familiar with it. So that is really the way to do it. It's just to keep practicing, keep showing up. The more we see, the more we hear, everything just calms down. We're not then in this hyper-focus mode. We're not in fight or flight. We're not fixating on every little detail. We're just becoming familiar and comfortable with seeing and hearing ourselves. And if this is still really uncomfortable, the thought of doing this a lot in real public environments, then start small. You can start practicing in safe spaces. I always tell my clients to just get used to that idea of seeing yourself more and hearing yourself more. So it can be really simple things like FaceTime your friend or a family member, someone you feel really comfortable with. Just FaceTime them more often so you're used to seeing your own face and hearing your own voice just more. Or you can do practice live. So on Instagram, you can go as if you're going to go live, but then you can set it as a practice. And so then no one else is in the room. It's not going out to your followers. It's only you. Or you can invite one person in, someone you trust, and just ask them to be in the room with you. And you can practice delivering a talk or just giving some thoughts or just chatting, and just get used to seeing and hearing yourself. And if nothing else, just like, stick your camera up, just stick your phone up and record yourself saying something. Record yourself talking about your business, introducing yourself. Let's say, example, you were at like a networking event and you were needing to introduce yourself. Record yourself doing it and watch it back. And you will feel uncomfortable at the start and it will feel awkward and you will dislike all the things that you see and hear. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you can become with it, the more familiar you will be. And then all those little things you'll stop noticing because you'll stop being in that hyper-focus mode, and therefore everything just gets easier. So there we have it. That is why we don't like the sound of our voice and looking at ourselves on camera, but what we can do about it and how we can easily start to fix this, and how long it takes to become comfortable and become familiar will be different for everybody. There's so many factors involved, and obviously the more uncomfortable you feel at the start, probably the longer it will take to get to a point where you feel comfortable, but it will happen. I promise you, I'm living proof of that. And you just need to keep going, keep practicing. And if this is something that you really feel like you need support with, and you just still feel so uncomfortable and don't know where to start, and want to look at the various options that are going to make you feel more comfortable in terms of lighting, positioning, angles of the camera, what you wear, how you speak, how you position your posture, all those sorts of things, then this is something that I help my clients with. And I have got a very, very exciting new program coming up very, very soon, which is going to be a 1 month, very small group program for just helping with confidence, with self-belief, with showing up online, with owning your story, and all these wonderful things that we need. So If this is something you feel like you might be interested in, then you want to get on a little early bird waiting list because I'm going to have some special bonuses. So just drop me a message, rachel@rachelbloomfield.com, or drop me a DM over on my socials. I'm at Your Visibility Partner on Instagram and Facebook, and also at @your_visibility partner on TikTok. So come drop me a message and let's chat and let me help you get out there, get more comfortable seeing yourself and get yourself online.